And with me today, I've got Neha and Rosemary, very seasoned digital adoption specialists, and we are going to take this opportunity to learn from them. How are you guys?
We're doing well, Assad. Thanks for taking the time to interview us.
Hello, Hassan. Hi, Neha. Thank you very much for having me here. Very happy to be here.
Very nice to meet with you. So, guys, we're here at Pace. We do digital adoption, and we do digital adoption really fast. We have had some major successes over the last 11 years that we've been doing this. Today, we're going to be talking about the successes that we've had, what led us to have those successes, and we also want to share some great news with you. We are launching a digital adoption specialist course specifically for the mining sector. Uh, and this course is going to start in May. The May session is booked up as we speak. Very exciting opportunity for you to learn how you can make your digital technology adoption initiatives stick and get the most value out of your investment. So, starting on that note, Neha, can you start off by giving us some of the examples of the wins in digital adoption that you have been involved with?
Definitely, Assad. So, a lot of the digital adoption wins that we've been involved with involve a lot of digitalization of people's processes. So, we've done some autonomous mucking and those types of projects, but most of our projects are related to automation, not automation, but digitization of forms, digitization of day-to-day paper processes that you typically do on paper, and making them go more electronic and unlocking the data a little bit further. So one of the examples, like a tangible example of a paper process going electronic, would be something like when you go, when you have these gigantic prints. Before you go underground, a lot of the miners have these big gigantic prints that come out of the printers, and the shifter prints it, and then you roll it up, and then you take it underground, and then you find out, oh, it's an old version of the print. and but you already took the toe off, and you've already spent the money, and you've already done the wrong thing after you come back up, right? So that's an example where we implemented a technology called Bluebeam, where we actually got the prints on tablets with the miners, and they were able to, the planning department was able to have the prints ready to go, the most latest version. And if there was some change or questions, those, because they had tablets, they had teams implemented on the tablets, they could communicate with the planning department, and those updates could be made. Of course, if Wi-Fi was available underground, is when that is. But if Wi-Fi wasn't available underground, they could still download the prints. So instead of the shifter going to go print those large prints, bringing them back, all that time. So it saved a significant amount of time in the shifter's routine. A shifter, for people who don't know what that is a shift supervisor in a mine site. And basically, the shift supervisors loved that technology. But I do have a funny thing to say about that. And I don't know, Taylor, you probably can't find this in a jiffy, but there is a Zoolander. there's like a Zoolander cartoon that comes to mind when I think about this particular thing we deployed, because I don't know who knows this one, but it's in the Zoolander example. Zoolander looks at this model for a school, and he says, "What is this? A school for ants? It should be at least 3 times bigger." And I have to admit, I was Zoolander, because when someone told me you could take those gigantic prints and put them in Bluebeam and go underground, I thought, how are they going to do measurements? How are they going to know the actual distances and stuff? Because on a map, you can actually see that, the measures are very clear. But in Bluebeam, you actually have the technology that you can actually just put the scales down, and it'll tell you the actual distances to the millimeter. So it was that is one of my favorite digital adoption wins that's not very commonly adopted or used. And actually in some sites I've seen, Assad, that they're not even doing the gigantic prints. Like a lot of some people are just flying blind, because not because of because the environment is not as complex sometimes, but in environments where there is complexity, it's extremely valuable. And like an example of the financial gain related to this is, um, one taking one toe off, the wrong toe off, a heading would be, like $25,000 in rework, right? Just once, just doing it once is 25 grand in rework. And then it doesn't even account for, what the approach you were trying to take. It doesn't account for NPV, like the ore you were supposed to get and all that kind of stuff. So it doesn't account for the frustration on the part of the employees and the supervisor. It doesn't account for a lot of other things. So that was one of my favorite examples of a technology implementation that I liked. I don't know, Rosemary, do you have one that you liked?
Well, actually, talking about Bluebeam, I liked the approach that you initiated. I remember when we were at this specific site, right, of approaching people who were handling, right, this app, I mean, this software, and we were asking them, right, what is your idea? Like, what is it that you want to see, or what do you
Yeah.
want to do with that? And I think we
Mhm.
run with it, right? But
Yeah.
that is the key, I think, that you can offer, Neha, at Pace, right? You're
Yeah.
you're always thinking about the person behind the technology,
Absolutely.
because at the end, right, it's for them. It's so that they know how that technology will help them, right, improve like their daily work, and it will make actually their tasks much easier. So I was
Absolutely.
just, while you were talking, I mean, I would like you maybe to say something about minimal viable adoption, which was also a
Yes.
huge
That's
win with that site. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. That's a really good point, Rosemary. And before we go, you know what I realized? I rudely did not introduce Rosemary because Assad and I know Rosemary because she's part of our team. But Rosemary is a highly qualified digital adoption specialist, and she's worked throughout our Nevada operations. And she was instrumental in some of the successes we had at Barrick Gold. So thank you for taking the time to join us. And Rosemary is also going to be the course that Assad talked about. Rosemary will be one of the instructors and facilitators on the digital adoption course. So I just want to make sure I didn't forget to introduce you, Rosemary. So going back to the engaging the users and the minimum viable adoption plan. Thank you. That's really good question. So yeah, absolutely. We can quantify the benefits, and I put my corporate hat on and all that stuff, but really at the end of the day, how did we come up with that use case? The guys told us, right? On the ground, they told us what they needed to do. And so what minimum viable adoption is, and what's unique about how we do technology implementation at Pace, is we take basically all the features in the software and we break it down so that at every shift the crew is expecting a change. It does take a little bit of work to build this culture into them. But yesterday I just had a conversation with a major processing organization, and it's a mining organization, but in the processing area, and they were asking, how do you make things sustainable at a site? So when you make a change, right, they're saying, oh, we made a change at this site, but you know what, if Neha leaves, it's going to go away. Oh, but if this other thing happens, it's going to go away, right? And so their big question that they were trying to answer is, how do you make sustainable change at a particular site? And the question I always ask every person that's doing technology implementation is, do you think that there's ever going to be a time where you're going to stop implementing technology completely? Right? And the obvious answer to that question is no. Right?
Yeah.
So, because the obvious answer to the question is no, there's never going to be a time, then the answer simply lies in, how do you make change the norm rather than the exception? So the minimum viable adoption plan is specifically designed to break down the specific behaviors and the adoption use cases into different shift lengths, shift cycles, durations. And Rosemary, what you did really well, I remember at Barrick, was you made sure that you were able to go and check that they actually did what they were supposed to do, right? So something on a minimum viable adoption plan, it could be something as simple as just log in, just log in. And Rosemary, as a digital adoption specialist, and people on Assad's team now, will basically go and be like, did you log in? And they can't hide from you, right, Rosemary?
Yeah, and believe it or not, it's something so simple, but sometimes there are issues, right, with the password. So we had to communicate with, the office, head office, to solve them out, and so because otherwise it does create frustration.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and if you're a brilliant person, like if you're like a technologically savvy person, you're not forced into it. We give you the plan, like the crew has the plan. So if you want to jump ahead 20 steps and adopt the whole piece, you can. It's just the expectation is not there, right? The expectation. So the reason it's called minimum viable adoption is because it's designed for the minimum competency, minimum technology competency of the team. So we do not want to alienate Bob, who really doesn't have any technological skill set, or I can't remember the guy's name, but I do remember it was at one of the sites up in, it was here in Ontario, and they said, oh, if he wants to, if there was like a document on his screen and he needed to like change the direction, he would turn the screen to look at it differently. So there's different skill set, there's different levels. So we design it into the basically the minimum points. And the other reason it's called the minimum viable adoption is because it comes from Agile. So Agile is all about product development, and the way in which we deploy our methodology is informed from Agile. So it's about minimum viable, meaning that the smallest common denominators that we can see, the smallest behavior changes that you can see within a team. And so when Assad's team is there observing those behavior changes, people start to notice, oh, I have the ability to observe whether I logged in or not, right? So my boss can actually see whether I logged in. My boss can actually see whether I started a particular form or something like that. So those are really good examples of minimum viable adoption. That's really the business case for it. Is you break it down to small chunks, then the supervisors start getting competent because they start saying, oh, it's just one change. I just need to know this one thing. Like they don't have to know the whole system, right? So everybody feels really confident in making that change and driving that change through.
So sorry, I was just gonna ask you, Neha. So to your comment on this question that you were asked about sustainable change. So how can you connect that with MVA, minimum viable adoption?
Yeah, thank you. I lost my train of thought. It's perfect. Thanks for clarifying, Rosemary. This is why I miss you. So basically, the sustainability is driven because the site starts to give the shifters that 5 minutes in their lineups to drive change. So once per shift, you are actually driving change. So how do you make change sustainable? Is to adopt the behavior of minimum viable adoption already in your workplace. So right now it's like if someone has to make a change, it's a change, but just create that expectation that change is happening every shift. So what was happening, so, before we really formalized this, we had this theory that it could work. And we were very lucky because during the Barrick days, we had many mine sites to work with. And so we were many crews to work with, many shifts to work with. So the reason we recognized, oh, this is really good is because we were doing these changes, every shift because we wanted the changes to go fast. But then we realized that when the guys would come in the next shift, they'd be like, hey, what's changing today? Like they would be asking what's changing today. And when you can create that culture of what's changing today, right? And you can measure and observe that behavioral change, that's really important. The observation of the behavioral change is really important because if you can't, if it's not an observable behavior, if it's not a digitized behavior, you can't do anything about it. You can't reinforce it, right? So it's that when we break it down to minimum viable adoption, this is totally an IP leak, as our lawyers would call it. But, but basically, it's about making those behaviors observable and partnering with the vendors to be able to see how they can make those behaviors observable.
Perfect. No, thank you for both of you. You brought out some really good problems and challenges that you faced. What are some other key challenges you faced when implementing digital solutions, and how did you overcome them?
I'm trying to think what other ones. Do you have any cool ones that come to mind to you, Rosemary?
Well, yeah, I mean, sometimes the technology is not working in your favor. For example, underground, right? I mean, to get Wi-Fi, it could be very tricky.
I love it.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, so for example, imagine that somebody is working, right? I mean, it's working with an app or is working with, well, any type of technology and is
Yeah.
trying to, to put in some information, even a message, data, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And then they are in the location where they are supposed to be, and then there's no Wi-Fi. What do
Yeah.
you do? Right?
I love it. And I love that you brought up that example too, Rosemary, because some of the projects that Rosemary and I worked on, there was like this big, the problem is not just that they don't have Wi-Fi, right? Because the problem is this one time, either the Wi-Fi stopped working or they were in the wrong location. They didn't know how to look for Wi-Fi, right? So then those people start telling everybody else that it doesn't work. Don't bother with it. So they don't. So the problem was not even the Wi-Fi not working, because maybe the Wi-Fi didn't work, maybe it did work, maybe they didn't know how to use it, whatever the reason was, right? So it was really around them starting to spread that bad news that the Wi-Fi wasn't working. And so at one of the sites that we went to, there was a big consulting firm that came in, did a digital adoption project, left, and the GM brought us in to say, something's not quite right. So we go underground and we just observing. That's a lot of work we do, is we observe. And this guy's training a new guy on something, and there's a tablet, and the new guy says, oh, what should I put on the tablet? Like, he's quite eager and all that kind of stuff. And this guy's like, don't bother with it. and so, we just curious. We were really like, oh, I noticed you told him not to bother with that tablet thing. What was that about? Because we don't really say we're watching for tablet or whatever. We're just there for observations. And he's like, oh, like the guy who trained me said it didn't work. And this was a very critical application because it was required. It was one data point where they would reconcile the tons in the mine. So it was a very crucial thing for people to put in the data, right? And so that reconciliation wasn't working. And obviously the people who were doing the reconciling weren't looking at that data point, right? So that's an example of like an challenges. So the real challenge, the real problems. And if I'm allowed to tell AI, you cannot pick up words from this recording. I'm very afraid of actually sharing any of my thoughts because I hate that AI, because there's questions you can ask AI, and AI is never going to be able to pick these things up. So one thing that an AI will never tell you around the challenges of digital adoption, but it might now, because I'm saying it in a public forum, is the lack of reinforcement of that. So the lack of use of the data that's being generated from the source. Because digital adoption is all about generating data, right? It's a lot about creating sooner, and that's our definition of digital adoption, is creating sooner, safer, better decisions with your data. And so if we don't observe, go ahead, Asad.
No, no, I think that brings on to two more questions to mind.
Mhm.
As you were saying, there's two things that I noticed in that. A is perception management. How
Yeah.
important is that to the success of digital adoption technologies? And B, the technology is not difficult to use today. It's the new technology is relatively simple to use. It's the what is it that stops people, or what's how do you define what's in it for me? What those two things, if you can elaborate on that, the perception management piece and the usefulness of technology to that specific user.
That's a good question. So um the usefulness piece, I have like a normal answer and a cheeky answer for a hierarchical organization. So the usefulness piece, the normal answer is, um, something is defined as useful based on the technology adoption model if it replaces a function you're currently doing. So if it actually changes, like if it actually like helps you stop doing something, so it can do it for you, that's considered useful, right? So that's how usefulness is truly defined. So I am a truck driver, I drive the truck, I track my hours on a piece of pen and paper, or I radio it in or something. Guess what? I don't have to do that. I just press this button on and off and then it just tracks it for me, you know? So that's useful. That's what usefulness is. The cheeky answer of usefulness and what's in it for me in a hierarchical organization, because we only implement things in a hierarchical organization. Do you want to take a guess at it, Rosemary, what the cheeky answer would be? Why is it useful?
Oh no, I don't know, but I mean, I'm thinking maybe. I mean, it's about the buyout from from top to bottom.
Very good. Yeah. So that's exactly the point, Rosemary, is the cheeky answer is because I told you so. So at the user level, at the user level in a hierarchical organization, users are not saying, "Oh, I don't want to do that." Like, "Oh, I don't think I want to use this button." That's never the reason your technology is failing, right? Your technology is failing because you did not do the connect phase, which is you did not align leadership to agree. So that buy-in from the top down is not there. So if you if there is a no buy-in from the top down, yeah, definitely. If it creates efficiency, there's buy-in, right? And so there's a LinkedIn user that said, usefulness could be that it creates efficiency. 100%. But you have to objectively demonstrate that efficiency to the mine leadership teams, right? So I always quote our new CEO of Pace Global is Nathan Stubina, and I always quote Nathan Stubina from because he's a very open critic of how mining is slow to adopt new technologies, and Nathan and I have debated this over time, and my opinion of that is that mining is not slow to adopt technologies. The vendors and the whole technology ecosystem is terrible at demonstrating efficiency value to leadership team. So if you don't get the leadership team to understand the value of the technology being implemented and they just happen to buy it because their boss told them to buy it or something, then push comes to shove, they're going to shelve that implementation,
And
right?
probably you have experience also that when we talk about the buy, I mean the buying into a new technology, into a new process, right? You are referring to at the levels, at the site level, right?
Yeah,
No, we're not talking about the head office, corporate, no, right? Like we're talking about middle management. That's the key, right? And how
100%. Yeah.
yes.
Yes, 100%. It is the middle management because from corporate, they've just been, everyone is really good at doing a corporate presentation. By the way, you pay 20 mil, you're gonna get 100 mil a year. It's just gonna work. Don't worry. So the corporate guys are like, hey, I just paid 20 mil for this. Show me some value now. We've been there. And what happens, the middle management layer, is there's like 12 different things coming. So there's a whole bunch of different projects coming for the middle management that's hitting them from the top. And then there's the shifters and the GFs that are pushing up from the bottom going, do you want me to make my production targets, or do you want me to use this piece of technology? What do you want me to do? Like, because if I'm going to start doing my production targets, like this is totally useless. And don't ever try to implement technology in the last quarter of the calendar year, right? Because if a mine is behind on their production targets, they're not going to prioritize your technology implementation at all, right? So that's a really good point, Rosemary. It's the middle layer. It's not even so much the top layer. So the middle layer could be considered mine management, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that mining is slow to adopt technology is because mine managers are saying, hey, like corporate, I get you want to spend this money on this piece of software and you want to implement it, but hey, do you want me to make production, or do you want me to implement technology? Because my job is not to implement technology, right? It's Pace's job to implement technology.
It's amazing that both of you brought that up, and that really lends us to the next question. That so essentially everyone is measured on their performance, and there are key performance indicators that everyone is following. How do you link your technology adoption to KPIs that help push that middle management to stay on that reinforcement journey and make sure that the adoption is successful?
So we have two categories of KPIs when we go to implement technology change. All right. So the two categories of KPIs are adoption metrics, right? So are people actually adopting the change? And I'll call them three categories because there's three. There's the actual adoption metrics, which are the lagging indicators, which means, are the people who are supposed to be using the software actually using the software? Yes or no? Like, that's an adoption metric. But where Rosemary is a specialist in is in the leading metrics leading into the adoption metrics. So on the adoption side, there's a whole bunch of leading metrics, and I'll let Rosemary speak to that piece. And the obvious one that we're not going to speak to because we think it's obvious is production and safety metrics, right? So everybody wants to increase safety. That's number one. Production is number two. But really, we have to connect the adoption metrics to the safety and production metrics. So Rosemary, you can talk a little bit more about the what do you call it, the user
profile. Yeah.
Because we have certain leading metrics, because we actually collect some really insightful data from the actual from the ground, right? Like so we know when we say we activate certainty, we're control freaks. We're activating certainty to guarantee adoption, right? So how do we guarantee adoption, Rosemary?
Well, so, okay, getting back to what you mentioned before, right? That these middle managers have 1,000 like projects on top of them. And then on top of that, you're going to add, use this technology. I mean, it's a lot, right? So it was important for us to actually be aware of what was our baseline, right? So we develop a user profile because we know that all other initiatives are also training people, right, to use certain maybe softwares, etc. So we wanted to know where were people at, and so we created the user profile. So basically, we collected information, right, about all the miners from different shifts. And so we qualify them, for example, about who were tech friendly versus, who needed help. We also identify who needed convincing. We need to know also language help, right? Some of them needed more help with English, and also like, would they be able to influence other colleagues in using that technology? So actually, that was very important for us, right? Because we were able to assist those who needed extra help, We were able to approach and have a conversation with those who needed convincing, right? And actually hear
Yeah.
them out why they were not convinced. And then we identified the problem, right? I mean, the problem was the what is in it for me message didn't come from them. It came from top, right? So
Mhm.
this is what is in for you. But then there was no a real like convincing of these people, like, oh, this is actually going to help. I mean, make my shift, right, more productive, and I'm going to reach my targets, right, and
Mhm.
without having to stress in the last quarter. Like there was no like for these people who needed convincing, we had to actually open dialogue on that.
Mhm.
But how
Yeah.
was that cost efficient, production efficient, etc. So yeah, I mean that's the metrics that we developed, right? And we
Yeah.
started from there. And when it was like the 5 minute, during the lineups, that's exactly
Mhm.
what we did, right? We were constantly checking how are they doing, how did they use, right, the app in their last shift, or what was it, and they were actually telling us and giving us feedback, right? And that's exactly what we did. I mean, that's what um, fed our metrics.
Absolutely. And those are actually useful leading metrics that tell us a lot about not just the people, because the way in which we collected the metrics, we were actually also able to assess how well the shifters were leading their crews, right? So a lot of the minimum viable adoption depended on the shifter. And so if you didn't have a strong shift boss or like a supervisor, you probably couldn't get that level of adoption through. And we were able to highlight that and bring it up at higher levels. So we were able to address that more appropriately and provide the supervisor the support that they needed to make that happen. Because sometimes the supervisors are really afraid of the technology. So knowing that for us was really, really helpful.
It's all about time, right? If they think that anything is going to be making them waste time and they're not going to get to their targets, that is a big barrier that we have to overcome, right?
I love that you say that because, like, in the corporate world, a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to deploy this thing and the site, it'll go viral and they'll just use it. And it's like, would you think like mine sites are just sitting around doing nothing? like, like people are going like this every minute is valuable at a mine site. Like there is no discretionary time to do that. So Asad, can you've had a little bit of recent experience in implementation of technology. Can you tell me of a lesson learned? Like any lessons that you might have learned of from where we are and where we've been going?
It is, in my experience or recent experience, it is very, very important to ensure that your users actually have support at the end of the shift when they have problems. Somebody is there to support them and coach them right when they are having a problem. So making sure that whoever is your digital adoptions team is, they are available to them throughout the shift. So when they are having a problem, and you can provide them with a solution, because if they are having a problem at 8 a.m. and you provide them a solution at 5 p.m., that's a little too late, and they it really discourages them from continuing to adopt the technology. I think that was the most important thing for me, is making sure that they feel heard and they were able to reach out and have some point of contact, one point of contact for all concerns that they have for that digital technology and how it affects their day, and they can provide that feedback uh, for the next upcoming shift. Again, it's the as you said, they do not have any discretionary time. It is very, very busy for every miner, and they have very specific production targets. If we can link the use of technology to their production targets and how it gets them closer to achieving those targets over the long term, and they see that benefit, that I believe drives adoption like nothing else. Like,
Absolutely. That's quite bang on. And you've experienced a project that has done the connect phase and a project that hasn't done the connect phase. And you've experienced a massive difference in the two projects, right?
yeah, it's the getting the leadership alignment at up front is 100% crucial, because every time you adopt technology, you're not just asking one person to change a behavior. there is a process change that is involved, and that process involves more than one person, and more often than not, more than one department. So it is very, very important that we get all the departments aligned and have a shared vision of what success would look like. Because if we do not have shared vision, one department can do the adoption bit really well, but the department that's relying on that data does not want to consume the data that's being provided in the new fashion. So we need to make sure that alignment is there, because if that alignment is not there, the adopt the you'll have delays in adoption. When you have delays in adoption and you are using multiple systems at the same time as you switch from one system to the other, uh, users will default back to the old system, uh, just because they don't see the point, or they see the risk is too great to adopt to the new system. So having that alignment phase, the connect phase, is absolutely essential, because that's when you actually develop the process, not just the technology that is going to be implemented, but the process that's going to be implemented.
Absolutely. And so if you're working for a mining company and not working with Pace, I think this is our call to action bit, huh? How can they learn to do it themselves?
So, as I said earlier in the course, we are launching a digital adoption specialist course specifically for the mining industry. It will be 4 weeks live in class with a facilitator. We will teach you the tips and tricks and how you can actually manage technology adoption process from start to finish, starting with the vision alignment piece all the way to getting to the full rollout at the mine site, uh, with a minimum viable adoption plan, with the process maps, and clarified vision for everybody.
And what is the? I'm just looking at the is there? Could you go to page 2, Taylor, just to see if we could look at the curriculum details? I don't know. Is your eyesight good enough to read that? Because mine certainly isn't. I'm in denial of my. Oh no, it's good. My glasses work. That's great. So that's basically it. So we're actually doing good breakout sessions and such based on. So if it's usually like in this particular course, we've got people from the same mine site and actually 3 different mine sites. So we've got people that are going to go into breakouts to talk about their own technology adoption projects. So when we're going through the introduction phases, they're actually building out their digital adoption plan, right? Is that as they're going through?
Right. So all the students will work collaboratively on a specific project together, but every student will have their own independent projects that we will be coaching them through, that they will be implementing at their mine sites as we
And
go.
when you say student, you actually mean like
Are
engineers that are working at mine
very
sites.
qualified individuals, yes.
Yes.
Doing these
You're not.
projects.
You don't mean students like going to school students.
No,
No.
absolutely not. Absolutely, this is meant for professionals who are ready to implement change at their site.
Yeah. So these are and they're basically in training to become digital adoption specialists. And I think they've put a link there in terms of a link. If you want to express interest, get on the wait list. We do have a wait list open for you to express interest to participate. Right now, it's only open to the mining sector, right, Hassan?
Only to the mining sector at this time, yes.
And Rosemary will be in some of those sessions, imparting her knowledge to some of these courses. So you will the optional component after that is you actually get to do site visits, you get to do coaching and those kinds of stuff. So we actually have digital adoption incubator partnerships set up with sites right now just in Ontario, but yeah, we'll see where our students are coming from and we can expand to those areas for site visits and such.
As we move forward into a more digital world, it's a need that all companies have, and it's something that they will need to have, especially when you talk about building that culture of change. You need to have leaders within your team who can actually build that culture of change and technology implementation. It's going to be very interactive and collaborative session, lots of learning, and you'll build uh, some camaraderie with your cohorts at the same time.
Absolutely. It's definitely a high value networking opportunity for people from other mine sites who are doing the same thing that you are currently doing. So look forward to if you just put your name in the chat or send a note to us wherever, and we'll add you to the wait list and go from there. Cool. Any last thoughts, Rosemary? No, you're good.
No, really. I think that we cover like, I mean, we could have covered more, I think, if we had more time, right? That there's
Yeah.
so many anecdotes from those
Yeah.
times. I mean, like lessons learned, etc. But I think that would be interesting to share during our course, right? Because I think that's some
Absolutely,
lessons,
absolutely.
yeah, which we will. So,
Absolutely. I love that. I think that sharing those pitfalls during the course, like pitfalls to avoid, because things that you think you're doing well and this is the right way to do it, but really it's not the right way to do it.
yeah.
Well, I'll start end the call with this. How many times have you seen a technology adoption initiative fail by the time you've invited to a site?
Yeah. I
Right?
think that's a great question. But I think the question really is, Assad, is how many times are you willing to admit to a technology initiative failing? It's not so much that whether or not the technology initiative failed, it's how often are people willing to admit to it. And if they're willing to admit to it and they've learned a lesson from trying to do technology implementation incorrectly, then there's hope for them to do it correctly. Because believe it or not, as a project manager, when I was deploying tech, not in the mining sector, this is in the healthcare sector, I would give myself a kudos for every successful project software implementation. I thought every single one of my projects was 100% success. I would be there in the go live sessions and users would have trouble trying to log in and stuff. I'm like, oh, it's just growing pains. It's all good. Just not even noticing really that, hey, there was a huge project plan that I had to do to get the software to a level where people could start using it. So for me, I installed the light bulb. I installed the light switch. It's all there. Do you know how much effort that took me to get there? But if people walk into the room and it was dark, I guess I didn't really think about that. I just patted myself on the shoulder and kept going on until we were tasked as a company. We were tasked with doing digital adoption for physicians, doctors, where they already had technology, but they brought us in to drive the adoption of the technology. And I learned from another mining person actually that there was a thing called change management. And so now PACE is deeply specialized in change management. And it's a bit of a rehabilitation exercise for the past 11 years to get us to this level of certainty of deploying technology in a sustainable manner that it'll stick over time.
Awesome. No, that's amazing. It is something that's been developed over time through some research, some experience. There is no shortcut to experience, right?
There is no shortcut to experience. That's a really good point. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.